Hi, my name is Laura. I'm one of the music teachers here at the Encore School of Music. Today I want to talk about playing hands together. Something I've noticed with a lot of my students is we learn one hand and then we learn the other and we start to put hands together and things get a bit trickier. So we like to take it back a step and really break down what's happening in the bar when we play hands together. The trick that my teacher taught me is called tapping coordination, where we have our right hand and our left hand, and we, instead of playing it, we tap the rhythm on our knees. We can see and hear how everything works together. So in this case, we'll be looking at the entertainer, which is a really good piece to look at when moving away from pieces that are really purely in unison, like a lot of beginner pieces, just slightly moving up to when we're starting to play stuff in between. We're going to be looking at this section in our right hand and in our left hand. Firstly, what we like to do is learn these parts hand separately. We do that once we're confident, then we move to putting it hands together, which is where we start to tap our coordination. Start with, let's tap it separately. We'll just be looking from bar 5. I like to add counting to this section as well. So acknowledging that we have quavers in this bar, we like to subdivide our counting into 2. Say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and because we're in 4/4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Good. And then we do the same thing with our left hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, even though in our bass clef we only have crotchets, because we're playing it hands together, it's really important to acknowledge that there is a quaver beat in between each one of these, which is often filled by our right hand. That's why instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, help with that hands together section of this song, we say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Good, we have them separately, now let's put it together. Instead of counting, which we can do when we tap them together, I like to acknowledge the coordination, so saying together, right, left, together, whatever's physically happening. In this case, we have together, right, together, together, right. One more time. Together, right, together, right. Good. Then what we do is we play one hand and we tap the other. You can continue coordination there, saying it out loud, saying our together, right, together. Then once we've done that, we do our left hand while we tap our right hand. Good. Do that a couple more times. Then we put it hands together. Good. Now, once we have it hands together, I like to have a rule of 3 system. This is introduced when we learn something new. We're really trying to get it into our memory. Rule of 3 is great. We play it once, we play it twice, and then 3 times, rounds it off. Sometimes what helps is having a tactile reward or a tactile object to move once we played it, which is really great with beginner students and younger students, or just somebody who wants to take a second to acknowledge, right, played that once, let's move this object. Today I will have examples of a toy, a clip, and some scissors. Then the trick is that if you get something wrong, if you make a mistake, you then move that object back, and then the aim is to then move it again. It's not super exciting, but it's good to have a break in between just to acknowledge that, yep, I played that right, let's move that, and then that's a symbol for that as well. In this case, this is our first time. Good. We move that object. You can move it back to where you got it from. Works for you. Good. So you move it again. And last time. So I made a mistake there. So I'm going to move this back and try it again. Good. And one more time. Good, and then that's our rule of 3 done. And we move on to the next bar and do the same thing. Now, usually you would have a bigger chunk of music to do this exercise with. Depending on how difficult the piece is and depending on how much time you have, you then change it depending. And what I like to do is phrase by phrase, particularly in pieces like this, because you see an overarching pattern. This is where it starts, this is where it ends. And instead of learning it in smaller chunks like bar by bar, it helps to pull the whole things together. Another thing that I encourage my students to do is to play scales. We use scales for 2 main things. for dexterity, so strengthening our hands, for the ability to play things fast, more intricately, to introduce finger numbers, all of those sort of things. And the other reason why we like to learn scales is for analysis, deepening our understanding of pieces, particularly if we're starting to write our own pieces. Today I want to talk about using it for dexterity or using it for warm-ups. A lot of my students, particularly when they're first learning scales, like to do something where they pull their wrist up and down whenever they're tucking their thumb under, because it's a new skill that they're learning, so a lot of the time it's overcompensated for. In this case, we'll be looking at D major. So for this exercise, I'll over-dramatize it a little bit. Sometimes what tends to happen is when you lift your thumb under and tuck it under to put it on G, and then what also happens is that you're less accurate with those notes, is that our wrist goes up and down like this, which means we can control the sound less, and it means we can play the scale slower. What I like to do is get my students to rest a coin on their wrist. And the challenge is that you have to balance it and make sure it doesn't fall off. This helps students play scales slower, more accurately, and it gets away from the jumping wrist as well. It's harder the bigger the coin is, and it's good to introduce it with a 10-cent coin or something that weighs a little bit more. And then when you move up, you can start doing some bigger coins like that. And I find that it really, really helps. It also helps to straighten your wrist out and to make sure that your posture is correct. Because if you're sitting too close to the piano and you're slouched, your wrist is not going to be in the right position. So we tend to have more room. We're playing and we're turning our wrist so much, it's more likely to fall off.